Welcome to Unlike Minded, a sci-fi audio anthology.
Beyond Landscaping by Chatree. A mower muse. Imagine you're one of the spare rovers sent to explore the surface of Mars. You fly through the void of space for 7 months. You understand your purpose: to take photos, as many photos as you can before your battery runs out. When you land, you get straight to work. You snap pics like a maniac. The empty red planet is desolate but beautiful. You think of home. You wonder what they think of your photos. You realize you have no idea if they're making it back there at all. But you keep taking photos anyway. You choose to believe. You see things no one has ever seen before. You capture those things frame by frame. You keep going, rolling along through the endless silence and solitude, hoping to discover a miracle. You hope to find someone else to take a photo of. You hope that they're hoping too. Back on Earth, Martin Song hadn't planned for things to be like this. He had dreams as a kid, like a lot of kids from Hog Mountain. Dreams of being an astronaut, a nautical deep-sea diver, whatever it was those folks did in Jurassic Park. The good dinosaur people, not the bad ones. But those weren't the things his friends dreamed of. They dreamed of being practical things like firefighters, farmers, school principals. People seemed to like his friends' dreams, so it felt right to dream like them too. Martin tried, but it didn't feel right. Not really. And that took him about 24 years too long to figure out. Now, his friends were living their dreams. His shed caught fire last summer, and Weston pulled up in a shiny red fire engine to save the day. And just last month, he mowed the roundabout and weed-whacked the entrance sidewalks of Griffin Elementary School. And what do you know? There was Cheryl, taking stock of the grounds, tending to her flock as it were, a principal of the country's largest K-12, by square footage anyway. Martin, the dreamless boy now aged 32 years, mowed grass. He liked it at first. It wasn't what his family thought he'd grow up to do, but he was good at it. It was stable. The landscaping arts, he called it at parties, but it got fewer laughs with each telling. It's a business that's always growing, he would follow up with. More groans than chuckles, usually. The last party he went to, can you even call it a party, was at his parents' house for their annual Christmas shindig. It was mostly his parents' friends in attendance. Of the children, as they're still referred to among their elders, Martin was the only regular. You know, Hog Mountain was named for all the pigs they'd sell at market here, not an actual mountain, Martin said to his mom's friend Mary, who was crocheting a new pot holder, deep in flow. How about that? She mumbled, barely listening. Martin wasn't much for small talk, and his version of big talk was obscure factoids that belonged on page-a-day calendars. That was a dream for a bit. Page-a-day calendar writer. But it died soon thereafter when no one returned his emails or handwritten letters. Martin often wondered if he was wrong about Hog Mountain being named after the market pigs. Georgia had mountains, loads of them. Maybe they just couldn't see Hog Mountain. Maybe it was a mountain with a massive gravitational pull that held people near it, and only the most willful, the biggest dreamers, could find a way to escape its grasp. Or maybe that was just another mower muse. That's what Martin called the stray thoughts that only sprung up on him after an hour or two driving his Gravely brand ride-on lawnmower. It was bound to happen when the majority of his day was spent alone mowing grass. His only companions, the mower he was saddled on, the grass he was cutting, the gnats he swatted away from his face. Gravely, A lesser-known competitor to industry behemoth John Deere was his boss's preferred model for no other reason than it was cheaper. That was how they did things at Beyond Landscaping. They weren't proudly Hog Mountain's most trusted and affordable choice in lawn care by breaking the bank on the fanciest brands. They were more salt of the earth than that. Regular, hard-working folk. The Gravely was old. Martin took good care of it, but there was only so much that day-to-day maintenance could do. He asked his boss if they could replace it, but all he got in return was a lecturous non-answer. People wouldn't care if you taped scissors to the side of a lazy boy, so long as you work clean and fast, Martin, clean and fast. So, after years and years of dutiful landscaping service, in addition to its many mechanical quirks, the Y on the mower's Gravely logo was completely smudged out. Martin rolled with it, took to calling the mower Gravels. It became an important part of his workday. Good morning, Gravels. It's a hot one today, huh, Gravels? See you tomorrow, Gravels. They shared a good relationship, simple, cordial, kind. When Martin arrived at the job site, the air smelled damp. The sky was gray and held a tight bundle of rain, the kind that built and built but never quite burst. Martin looked into the cloudy expanse and felt understood. Got ourselves a gray one, Gravels. Better mosey while we can. The field before him was a vast, overgrown patch of land behind the high school athletic fields. The passive-aggressive whispers of parents with big pocketbooks and far too much time on their hands had reached the ears of the administration, so something simply had to be done with the eyesore beyond left center field. It was one thing to mow someone's yard, but Martin didn't care for jobs like this. It felt to him like the wilderness was minding its own business, doing its thing all peaceful-like, and then he arrived to butcher it. It didn't feel right. So with places like this, Martin took his time. First, he walked the grid he planned to mow, carefully scanning for any startled wildlife and their habitats. He would move what he could, shoo what he couldn't. Once his walkthrough was complete, then he began the ritual. The ritual was something only he and Gravels knew about. A couple of months ago, an intrusive thought won the day. He grew tired of all the clean lines and right angles of the conventional mow. He craved something new, something rebellious, anything. His first attempt wasn't too crazy. A spiral on a plot of grass beside a grocery store parking lot with some squiggles through it. Later, he tried overlapping math symbols, a strange chicken scratch of multiplication and long division in Mr. Sinnett's backyard. He would always return to the usual pacing lines, of course, all evidence of his deviations erased as quickly as they were drawn. A great day called for something special, something bright, something that captured the truth that behind the leaking layer of would-be storms, the sun was still there, glowing and burning and illuminating as it always did, even when everything else appeared dim. Especially when things were dim. There was always a light, somewhere out there. Martin started with a circle first, then made interlocking rays, beams of light weaving in and out of each other to create a snaking sunburst. He didn't bother worrying if along the way symbols in the grass no longer matched the image in his head. That wasn't what the ritual was about. It wasn't about the design itself, but rather the places the design would let his mind wander to. The past, the future, occasionally the present. Martin thought of it as the place where his dreams lived, tucked away in the back pocket of the universe, safe from the hungry, dream-devouring maw of Hog Mountain. With each ritual, Martin would let his mind wander more and more. With no specific destination in mind, sometimes those wanders would lead him to wondering why he did it in the first place. Was it only to visit a land of dead dreams? Or was there something more? Maybe a part of himself was reaching out to say something. Maybe he hoped someone would notice him mowing strange symbols, ask him about it, force him to come up with reason on the spot. Maybe they'd find his reason interesting, find him interesting. Or maybe he was just bored. As he weaved another beam of light through the center of his makeshift sun, a sliver of the skies above became less gray. If Martin had been looking, he would have seen that sliver alighting with white-hot intensity. He would have seen that sliver impossibly carve itself into a sharp right angle and then into a square directly above him. He would have seen the lines of the sliver shimmer with starlight. But a groundhog sprung from its hole in the ground, terrified of the gnashing of blades bearing down on its home, and Martin had dismounted to protectively shoo the rodent away from Gravel's teeth. Unlike Martin, the groundhog had seen the sliver of sky descending, determined skies shouldn't do that, and bolted away. The sky allowed the groundhog to leave before it swallowed Martin whole. A mower mews. What does it feel like to be a blade of grass? For a time, things are dark. The earth around you is cool, refreshing. Then a tiny pinprick of light warms the tippy top of your noggin bit by tiny bit until the sun welcomes you to the world above. You're surrounded by your friends and family. Some of them just arrived, like you. Others have been here for a while. They stand tall. You feel the breeze gently brush your face. Most of Martin's mower muses went unanswered, but now he knew with terrifying certainty what it felt like to be a blade of grass on its first day breaching through dirt. He didn't know where he was exactly, but he knew it wasn't Hog Mountain. He was surrounded by grass, shoulder high. The sky was bluer than usual, and empty. He could feel the warmth of the sun, but there was no sun to be seen, no clouds. He ran a hand through the grass, each blade uniform, exactly like the last. Ahead, there was a clearing cut out of the field in a perfect square. Everything around him was just so, but also somehow just off, as if designed by someone who had only been told what fields and grass and clearings and summer sky looked like, but had never seen or felt or experienced it themselves. It reminded him of an artist he saw who created landscapes using construction paper clippings, like grade schoolers did. It was only when you looked closely, very, very closely, that you could see it wasn't construction paper at all. It was paint. Realism capturing a child's attempt at realism. Martin looked more closely at the grass. The blades themselves. They looked like grass, but didn't feel like grass. They felt softer. They felt velveteen. Through the sea of felty grass, Martin pushed farther, toward the clearing, where he saw something else familiar. It wasn't there a moment ago, but now it was. There was Gravels, his ride-on lawnmower. At least it looked like Gravels, down to the bursting creases in the old pleather seat, the faded chipping red paint, the dulling blades that sat crooked beneath the carriage. It was the logo that gave it away. The logo was alien chicken scratch, scrambled wingdings in pristine white type. Maybe he fell off his mower. He fell off his mower, hit his head on a rock. His unconscious self was baking in the sun, and this elaborate delusion was how his mind chose to protect him from the trauma until help arrived. He hoped Weston wasn't the EMT on shift today. He would never hear the end of it. Gravels crept towards him. Martin yelped, startling himself as much as the mower, which respectfully inched away in response. The Gravels who wasn't Gravels rocked its steering handles back and forth, an unsettling, creaky sway. Martin felt queasy. Whether this was in his head or not, he needed to find a way out of this place. Beyond the fields of strange grass was more strange grass. Behind him, the same. If this place operated on dream logic, perhaps the sky above would hold the key. If it did, Martin couldn't see it through the cloudless blue. Blue so blue it hurt his eyes a little. The mower purred. It was a sound Martin had never heard before. The engine didn't cut on. It wasn't the blades whirring to life. It purred, like a big mechanical house cat. If you looked at a gravely ride-on lawnmower from just the right angle, with the right combination of boredom and imagination, you might could see a face, wide-set eyes, a tiny thin mouth, the steering handles as oversized, overly expressive eyebrows. Martin saw faces in all sorts of inanimate objects, power outlets, sinks, certain Volvo models. And now, looking at Gravels, he saw the face of a creature attempting to render itself as non-threatening as possible. Martin purred back at his lawnmower. A snap decision he made out of fear, but it also felt right somehow. Odd, but right. Gravels shifted on its 360-degree axis, doing a little half twirl side to side. Was it a curtsy? A dance? That thing bulls do before they charge at you head on, horns down, murder in their hearts? There was no way to know for sure. So Martin purred again, this time lifting his hands in front of him, the way you would for a spooked horse. I mean you no harm. These are the hands of a harmless, weaponless, confused man. Gaze upon them, these gentle, calloused hands, and be at peace. Gravels inched forward, lowered its steering handles, reaching out. Martin carefully placed a hand on the mower with no idea of the consequences. Anything could happen. They stood that way for a while. The purring mower stopped purring. The silence became unbearable. So Martin tried small talk. Do you know there's no actual mountain in Hog Mountain? The mower, like most people Martin shared this fact with, did not respond. Martin wasn't entirely unsurprised. His conversations with Gravels had always been one-sided. Martin sighed. I wish I knew how to talk to you. The mower said nothing. Martin squinted at the sky. He wondered how long it must have taken to bring them here, wherever here was. It felt like hardly more than a blink had passed, but who's to say how long that blink really lasted? Seconds, minutes, hours, days, months? Why me? Martin hadn't thought about the question before he blurted it out. It was involuntary. It had been bubbling up inside him his entire adult life. I don't have anything to give you. I haven't achieved anything. I don't have much in the way of secrets or knowledge. Not the sort people who matter care about. I don't even really know what I'm doing, you know? I just kind of plod along, hoping something happens that changes everything, that clears things up somehow. Lost in his own words, the things he'd held tight to his heart but never shared, Martin didn't notice Gravel's seat swivel slightly toward him, like a dog tilting its head to listen more carefully. And here you are, whatever it is you are, and I still don't know what it means, or what you're saying, or if you're trying to say anything at all. Martin slumped to the ground, leaned against the lawnmower. It wasn't the first time he had done this. Gravels had borne witness to his fair share of Martin's gray days. Those days when the air felt heavier than it should be. Days that moved at half speed. Days that were fuzzy at the edges. Gravels was a good listener. Always had been. For the last month or so, Martin had no idea just how literal a description that was. We don't yet have a way to translate the name of the being into written English. The being was a solitary scout on an exploratory mission. He had spent what felt like countless time units away from home when he realized the true nature of his assignment. He was on the shit detail. No one liked warping to the Milky Way to stare at those boring rocks, even if there was a form of intelligent life emerging. The authority of the being's world had taken an interest in this corner of the cosmos after some primitive life forms managed to land what amounted to a bottle rocket on a nearby moon. That initial interest waned in the intervening decades, when all that followed was shinier bottle rockets flying up, landing, going back. The authority was mildly amused with how long it took them to bring their bottle rockets home. But that amusement alone wasn't enough to waste further resources on extended observation. Not regularly, anyhow. Sure, they would send a scout every now and again to do their diligence, check in for anomalies, But expectations for what would be observed were very low. Sending the scout to take notes on the rock that called itself Earth became more important as a hazing initiation ritual than anything else. The being struggled to align with his fellow beings. The being liked the Earth rock, in the way that Earth rockling children liked ant farms. The being saw potential, saw lives being lived. But the being was alone in this feeling. The being was alone in many feelings. Then he saw the message. During a routine topographical scan of the planet's surface, the being discovered the impossible. An Earth rockling was using a machine to carve through an open expanse, forming the very same symbol that the being learned as a child to etch onto the walls of homes he visited before crossing the threshold. It meant, essentially, warm gratitude and salutations to you and yours. To Earth rocklings, it looked like a squiggle in a spiral. The being shirked off all other responsibilities to observe this fascinating creature and his machine, this interstellar savant. Had anyone before him gotten this close to making direct contact? The being felt that somehow this was an invitation, but he couldn't message home about it. He would be laughed into oblivion. He needed something undeniable. It would require him to break protocols, expose himself to variables only theorized about until now. The being didn't even know their language, or how he would communicate his pure intentions. There wasn't much time. The being understood how short a rockling lifespan was. It would be risky, but there was only one thing to do. The being would make contact, but first, he would engage in a reconnaissance mission, espionage. He would disguise himself as the rockling's beloved machine, and then he would do what he always did. He would observe. Take notes of the things that made the rockling comfortable, the places where he spent most of his time, his environment. He would listen, and when the time was right, the being would bring the rockling aboard his ship. He would have to make some adjustments to the interior decorating, of course. He wanted the rockling to feel welcome. It would take a few manual tweaks to the environmental simulator software. But even then, their planets were made up of very different things. The being was confident he could get most things to look right, but he would have to make some educated guesses beyond that. Hopefully, that would be enough to set the rockling's mind at ease. He would see an effort was made, if nothing else. The being told himself it was all for the sake of the mission, for a great unprecedented discovery. He would be the one to record a major turning point in the development of this little planet everyone had dismissed. But he had been many, many time units away from home. Maybe he was just lonely. Maybe he always had been. A mower mews. When dogs dream, they dream about their favorite things. That includes their owners. Think about it. There's not a moment of their lives that they're not thinking about their people, steeping themselves in the things that fill their little puppy hearts up to full. What a gift that must be. Could a person with enough practice reshape their own dreamlands to serve a similar purpose? What peaceful slumber that would be. Martin wondered if it was possible to dream in a place like this. He had run out of more straightforward ideas of leaving, and his attempts to interrogate Gravels were going nowhere. So he closed his eyes and tried to fall asleep. As a kid, he could fall asleep anywhere, sitting up on a bus or plane or wrapped in a threadbare sleeping bag on uneven ground when his family went camping. Once he fell asleep nuzzled into the crook of his grandparents' staircase after Thanksgiving dinner, one leg dangling through the banister. Martin was close to dozing off, but Gravels revved its engine, startling him awake. It was the first thing the mower said in what felt like hours. Martin growled back. He immediately regretted it. "I'm sorry, you didn't deserve that. I'm just tired." Martin had been tired for so long that he couldn't remember what it was like to feel rested. "You've got to be tired too, Gravels. You've only ever known one thing, and you've been doing that thing for ages. You're more than that one thing you do." Martin gazed up at the cloudless blue. Beyond it, he could see the faint twinkling dots of what could be stars. Gravels perked up. Martin picked at a weird clump of knot grass. The mower's engine roared to life. Then Gravels peeled off into the field, blades churning. Puzzled, Martin followed. He brought his knot-grass clump with him. Gravels weaved through the field with incredible agility and grace. Its turns were smooth and precise, in defiance of what should have been physically impossible to achieve with such an aged piece of equipment. As Martin approached, he couldn't believe his eyes. Gravels was mowing the very first symbol he made all those months ago. Nonsensical to most, the squiggles and spiral were his best recollection of the strange shadows the trees cast on his childhood bedroom window. The shapes were calming to him, a snapshot of a time when things were simpler, when the future felt more hopeful in its vastness. With enough imagination, those shadowy squiggles could be anything you wanted them to be. On sleepless nights, he traced the outlines of those shapes in the air with his finger until they merged with the stars in the sky beyond. Martin walked the path of the last curl of the spiral to find Gravels turning to greet him. It was only when he stood in the midst of the clippings, a squiggle himself, that Martin could see Gravels' actual magic trick. Tiny, perfect little stars gilded the borders of the symbol, twisting around each line like cosmic Christmas lights, etched with laser-like precision. John Deere couldn't make something so beautiful with all the time in the world. And for the first time in a long time, Martin didn't feel so alone. "Okay, Gravels, I get it now," Martin said as he took a step onto the lawnmower. "Let's go see the stars." No one saw the beam of light shoot skyward from the clearing beyond the left center field fence. It was the middle of the afternoon. The sun was high and blistering, and most folks were doing everything they could to avoid the outdoors altogether. Here's a page-a-day calendar fact Martin included with his rejected query. Did you know rodents can perceive ultraviolet light? Spectrums invisible to the human eye burst aflame with light to those critters. Even so, the groundhog Martin's song, saved from certain death by lawnmower, had never seen light like that before. Arcing into space, gliding among the stars, disappearing into the distant cosmos. The start of something new. The groundhog stared in awe and began to dream of all the ways this moment might change his groundhog life forever.
This has been Unlike Minded, a sci-fi audio anthology. Collection 2, A Traveler's Guide, Stories about Space, Time, and Other Worlds. Beyond Landscaping was written by Nick Chatree and narrated by Rodney Gardiner. Unlike Minded is an August year-round production, created, produced, and edited by Robbie Hyne. We'd like to give a special thank you to everyone who has supported this independent podcast production. You can keep up to date and find more info about this podcast and others on Instagram at the handle AugustYearRoundProd, or email us at augustyearround@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe, leave a rating and review, and tune in next week for another episode of Unlike Minded. Thank you for listening.